How do you determine your stakeholder groups? Well, your stakeholders are defined to agree by how interested they are in your organization or how are they affected by your organization's impacts. Can they influence the outcomes of your organization? Are they invested in the success or failure of our organization for the long term? Or are they just someone who flies by night and you never see them again? When you're looking at how to determine which stakeholder groups to look at, this next slide right here is a spider web of these are all of your potential stakeholders. Now this one is intentionally shown. This was one that we did with an organization. It just gives you an idea of how in depth you can go and how mind-numbing you can be on this. And what you see here is this just is totally overwhelming to an organization. So what you really want to be looking at is who are our primary and secondary stakeholders. This slide generically shows who traditionally primary and secondary stakeholders are. Almost all organizations, who your customers are, who your employees are, your suppliers, your investors, maybe, if you have philanthropic donors that you're putting out there. And then you have secondary, stakeholders. It might be media, government, NGOs, creditors, your industry association. Now, this is going to change, of course, based on your industry. If you're highly regulated by the government, obviously the government's going to be a primary stakeholder. If you're under intense media scrutiny, or if you're, let's say you're an NGO organization, your stakeholders are going to shift. But this is just to give an idea who your primary, secondary stakeholders are in general and for most organizations. So you don't have to be completely overcome by that spiderweb diagram on the previous slide. So in conclusion, when you're talking and thinking about your primary and secondary stakeholders, think about who are the key people that you need to be paying attention to and why. And if you're going to be taking the time and energy and effort to work on this, whose input do you really need that's going to impact your business? Once you've determined your primary and secondary stakeholders, you need to determine materiality. Now here's an example from an organization that our company, Sustainable Business Consulting, worked with, where we helped them understand, okay, across all these potential social environmental issues on the table, what were the most important ones internally and externally to the organization? As you see in the upper right quadrant, those are the most important ones both internally and externally. You get things like economic performance, employee training and education, company culture, environmental impact, compliance. Then you see things down in the lower left quadrant. These are the least important. These are things such as waste, water, material use, labeling. Now, and then you get things like external things such as corruption and public policy. Well, these may be not important on the internal side because you probably have these buttoned down, but maybe externally the organization was feeling like these are questions that need to be looked at. So you need to realize that this graph, and when you try and plant your different stakeholder issues on there and what they care about by surveying and working with your stakeholders, you really want to be focusing on which are the ones that are most material to your different stakeholders and which are most ones that you care about overall. So I want to give you an example of one of our clients, which had been doing a lot of work on water issues and on waste. And it turned out, this was the client example right here, that no one really cared about what they were doing. It wasn't a high priority issue for either stakeholder group. And while they had been spending a lot of time on it and communicating, it's not going to be something that if people don't really care about, they're not really going to listen to or give you a whole lot of credit and props for. So that's an important understanding of when you're doing stakeholder engagement, to understand what are the issues that are most material to both your internal and external audiences. As you look at the level of engagement, you want to be looking at who can really have power and who really has interest in what you're trying to do. And so you see those ones in the upper right quadrant. They map like the previous slide. Those are ones that are really important. So you need to manage those very closely. Now, ones that are really powerful, but maybe aren't so interested in stuff, you just need to keep them satisfied in that upper left quadrant. Issues where, the stakeholders and their level of engagement, they don't have a whole lot of power interest. Those are, some of those issues down the bottom left. Those are just ones you want to monitor, be paying attention to. And then the ones on the lower right, those are the ones you want to keep informed. So you're trying to think of, okay, we can't communicate everything to every stakeholder group, but this gives you an idea when you're looking at someone's level of engagement, how you want to go about that, because you can't tell every Tom, Dick, and Harry everything that you're possibly doing. So you need to understand, okay, what do we need to do to really make sure that we're managing this issue to our most powerful constituents and on the issues they care about? And on the ones that are not that powerful but are important issues, these are ones that we maybe need to keep people informed about.